You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday, the 12th of August 2013. Foreign aid, why don't we just burn the money? £40 for racist attack on Blackburn police officer. EU flag on British birth certificates in 3 years. Construction firms in Greece reluctant to build Athens mosque. Eurocrats to spend £6 million to host pro-EU youth camp days before MEP elections. Zimbabwe to open a blacks-only stock exchange. Egyptian singer labels Obama terrorist, says he works with Muslim Brotherhood. The rise of the bear, 18 signs that Russia is rapidly catching up to the United States. Thought for the day, Hegelian dialectic or just lies? And finally, Ginger and Scottish, can't get much worse, can it? UK news. Foreign aid, why don't we just burn the money? Last week the Daily Mail treated us to the headline declaring how £1 billion cash used to help Nigeria join space race. This week Michael Burley puts forward the opinion that Nigeria is a country so corrupt it would be better to burn our aid money, and goes on to outline the wealth and corruption of Nigeria, and says that by the end of its term of office the British government will have handed over £1 billion in aid to that country. We then turn to the USA's Fox News and learn that the UK writes off £480,000 in supplies due to theft in Somalia by al-Shabaab militants, as the British government says that £480,000 of humanitarian aid supplies funded by the UK was seized by al-Qaeda affiliated militants in Somalia between November 2011 and February 2012. World at 8 comments. Everyone knows if God wanted to give the world an enema, he'd put the end in Nigeria. Now, if that weren't bad enough, the India Express tells us that the former jewel of the British Empire will soon launch the aircraft carrier INS Vikrant. INS Vikrant, a 37 500-ton carrier, will operate 25-30 aircraft, including MiG-29K and light combat aircraft. World at 8 says something the UK is unable to do in the foreseeable future. The reports from India say that other countries capable of designing and building an equivalent sized ship are the US, the UK, Russia and France. I think they have that wrong. It may be the US, Russia, France and China. I doubt the UK has the capability any longer. We've been letting every Thomas, Dumas and Herman have a bit of our defence business. £40 for racist attack on Blackburn's police officer. The Lancashire Telegraph report the conviction of Tahis Hussain for racially aggravated disorderly behaviour against a policeman dealing with a 13-year-old female runaway. PC Ben Dowling was asked to attend Whalley New Road due to concerns over the girl's welfare. Her mother feared she might harm herself. When he found the girl, she became aggressive towards him. At this time the policeman was surrounded by Asian men and subjected to racist abuse by one of them. Blackburn magistrates heard Tahir Hussain swore at the officer and told him to go back where you live. He was given a conditional discharge for 12 months and ordered to pay £40 costs. World at 8 states, if this had been a policeman uttering racist abuse on these Muslim abusers, he would have been suspended and vilified. It's all arse up in this country now. It really must stop. EU flag on British birth certificates in 3 years. The EU flag set to replace the royal crest on British birth certificates despite ministers' bid to block move. Communities Secretary Eric Pickles says he is unable to prevent the replacement, which means the EU flag will be stamped on all UK birth certificates within 3 years. World at 8 comments. This does have an upside. If the EU stamp is on all birth certificates, that means it will be on all the immigrants born that have British certificates as well. So we can deport all of them throughout the Schengen area and out of the UK, can't we? European news. Construction firms in Greece reluctant to build Athens mosque. Greek authorities are having difficulty in finding a construction company to build the first state-sponsored mosque in Greece. A fourth tender for the construction of the €46,000 project in the Votanikos area will be made next month. according to the Infrastructure Ministry, Marini reports, as in all previous attempts have failed to attract any takers. Our European writer comments, at last a country that has some standards not related to making money. Eurocrats to spend £6 million to host pro-EU youth camp days before MEP elections. The Daily Mail reports the European Parliament is to spend £6 million on a youth camp to promote Brussels days before crucial elections. Eurocrats are accused of nothing short of bribery by organising the event for 5,000 16 to 30-year-olds ahead as voters prepare to go to the polls to elect new MEPs. The bizarre event includes role-play games, concerts and idea labs to debate youth unemployment in the European Parliament's Strasbourg headquarters. But more than 700 MEP will also be able to sponsor 10 young people each to send to the event, which it is claimed could breach rules on treating voters during election time. Made in Germany tag threatened by EU. Fears are growing in Germany that new EU rules could herald the demise of the Made in Germany merchandise mark, and with it a reputation for quality built up over decades. World at 8 comments, it's about time the Germans felt the sting of their dog's tail. World news. Zimbabwe to open a blacks-only stock exchange. Thanks to the Telegraph, we learn Zimbabwe's regime has promised to open a new and racially exclusive stock exchange, allowing blacks alone to trade shares seized from foreign companies. The plan to grab mining companies, most of which are South African owned, follows President Robert Mugabe's landslide re-election last week. Xavier Katsukeri, the indigenisation minister, said on Tuesday that the government, or black Zimbabweans, would take 51% of the shares in all major foreign-owned companies, valued at about £4.8 billion. No compensation will be paid. World at 8 says, perhaps we should follow suit. No people of colour or immigrants should be able to buy or trade British or European stocks. Sounds okay to me. And of course no compensation for them either. Two can play at being racist, especially in their own countries. Egyptian singer labels Obama terrorist, says he works with Muslim Brotherhood. An example of the vitriol in the country can be seen in a new video clip featuring a song by Egyptian performer Sama El Masri. Titled You Obama, Your Father, Mother, it attacks the US president for allegedly preferring Islamic radicals over the army. It has gone viral with over 160,000 views since last week. The clip features Obama in traditional Islamic dress. El Masri curses him while mentioning that he had called for former President Hosni Mubarak to leave immediately, seeming to imply that this proved he was pro-Brotherhood. The rise of the bear, 18 signs that Russia is rapidly catching up to the United States. Michael Snyder, writing for The Economic Collapse, tells us the Russian bear is stronger and more powerful than it has ever been before. Sadly, most Americans don't understand this. World at 8 says it's not just Americans, most British don't either. Michael goes on, they still think of Russia as an ex-superpower that was rendered almost irrelevant when the Cold War ended. And yes, when the Cold War ended, Russia was in rough shape. I got the chance to go over there in the early 90s, and at that time Russia was an economic disaster zone. Russian currency was so worthless that I joked I could go exchange a $20 bill and buy the Kremlin. But since that time Russia has roared back to life. Once Vladimir Putin became president, the Russian economy started to grow very rapidly. Today Russia is an economic powerhouse that is blessed with an abundance of natural resources. Their debt to GDP ratio is extremely small, they actually run a trade surplus every year, and they have the second most powerful military on the entire planet. Anyone that underestimates Russia at this point is making a huge mistake. The Russian bear is back, and today it is a more formidable adversary than it ever was at any point during the Cold War. Just check out the following statistics. The following are 18 signs that Russia is rapidly catching up to the United States. 1. Russia produces more oil than anyone else on the planet. The United States is in third place. Russia is the number 2 oil exporter in the world. The United States is forced to import more oil than anyone else in the world. Russia produces more natural gas than anyone else on the planet. The United States is in second place. Today Russia supplies 34% of Europe's natural gas needs. 5. The United States has a debt to GDP ratio of 101%. Russia has a debt to GDP ratio of about 8%. 6. The United States has a trade deficit of more than $500 billion last year. Russia consistently runs a large trade surplus. 7. The United States has an unemployment rate of 7.4%. Russia has an unemployment rate of 5.4%. 8. Since Vladimir Putin first became president of Russia, the Russian economy has grown at a very rapid pace. The following is from Wikipedia. Under the presidency of Vladimir Putin, Russia's economy saw the nominal gross domestic product double, climbing from 22nd to 11th largest in the world. During Putin's 8 years in office, the industry grew by 75%, investments increased by 125%, and agricultural production and construction increased as well. 9. According to Bloomberg, Russia has added 570 metric tonnes of gold to their reserves over the past decade. In the United States, nobody seems to be quite sure how much gold the Federal Reserve actually has left. 10. Moscow is the second most expensive city in the world. Meanwhile, the United States actually has the unfriendliest city in the world, Newark, New Jersey. 11. More billionaires live in Moscow than any other city in the globe. 12. The Moscow metro system completely outclasses the subway systems in Washington, D.C. and New York City. 13. The United States has the most powerful military on the planet, but Russia is in second place. 14. Russia has introduced a new near-silent nuclear submarine, which is far more quiet than anything the US has. 15. While Barack Obama is neutering the US strategic nuclear arsenal, Vladimir Putin is working hard to modernise Russian nuclear forces. 16. Russian missile forces will hold more than 200 drills during the second half of 2013. 17. Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin made headlines all over the world when he climbed into the cockpit of Russia's new 5th generation fighter jet and announced it was far superior to the F-22 Raptor. 18. It's estimated that Russia has more spies inside the United States today than it did at any other point during the Cold War. World at 8 comments. If the UK left the EU, deported all of its illegal immigrants and a huge proportion of our Muslims and immigrant criminals, we would be in the same state as Russia after the fall of the Berlin Wall. But we would be forced to do what they have done, revert to self-industrialisation and providing for our own with our own. It would be hard, as we would have sanctions from certain parts of the world, but it would mean we would have to learn to do without or produce certain items once again ourselves. We would, however, need a Putin, and we don't have one. We do have a moron and a millipede. Thought for the day. Hegelian dialectic or just lies? Now today I was going to talk about the double standards of publicity and information, the course of which will certainly heat up nearer the time to the Euro elections and of course the general UK ones. I've talked a lot about misinformation and the effect it has on the masses and was sent this by our Euro correspondent, and it fits right in with what I have to say. It is the Hegelian dialectic and its use in controlling modern society. This was originally posted by General Maddox, realnewsaustralia.com. What exactly is the Hegelian dialectic? Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was a 19th century German philosopher who devised a particular dialectic or method of argument for resolving disagreements. His method of arriving at the truth by the exchange of logical arguments is a system of thought process still used to this day. To put it simply, the basis of Hegelianism dictates that the human mind can't understand anything unless it can be split into two polar opposites: good, evil, right, wrong, left, right. For example, when people are talking about two political parties, Labour or Liberal, remember this guy's in Australia, what they're actually referring to without realising it is the thesis and the antithesis based off the Hegelian dialectic. The only real debate that occurs is just the minor differences between these two parties. Nothing is said or done about the issues that neither left nor right is discussing. This in particular will become more apparent as the elections draw near. On the top of the chart of this dialectic is the agenda, branching off to the left with thesis, which in this case is stated as manufactured terrorist threat, leading to antithesis, which is a repressive police state, which leads to synthesis, which is the removal of freedoms and transfer of power from the people to the few. Another form of the Hegelian dialectic is problem, reaction, solution. Most of us unwittingly fall victim to it all too often, and sadly, if we don't stop, we will continue to lose our free will and liberties. It has been widely used by our governments and corporations around the world. You could say that in terms of controlling the masses and society in general, its deployment has been an effective tool in keeping humanity in check. Almost all major events in history employ the Hegelian dialectic of problem, manufacture a crisis or take advantage of one already in place in order to get the desired reaction of public outcry, whereby the public demands a solution which has been predetermined from the beginning. Maddox uses the example of 9/11. I would have used Pearl Harbor myself as an excuse for the States to come into the Second World War. I don't like to think of the powers that be in the US knowing that 9/11 was actually going to happen and lose all those innocent lives. As speaking personally, I was due to be there at the site of the first plane hitting the Trade Center at 9:30, and it was only due to a family delay that I, my husband and youngest son and his girlfriend were not all killed. Now I know I might not have been missed, but I would have certainly missed myself. Here is a more current example of Hegelian dialectic in use. In Australia at present, both of the main political parties on the eve of the upcoming election on September 7th are discussing boat people, a derogatory term used to describe refugees and asylum seekers displaced by war or other hardships. I don't believe they constitute what you would call a crisis, as the statistics clearly show they aren't, but for the purpose of this example our government is telling us they are a problem. The media is used to play up this problem in order to instigate a reaction debate in the public domain and how to tackle it. Both the opposition and ruling party offer their solution. In order to avoid falling victim to the Hegelian dialectic from now on, you must remember the process involved. Any time a major problem or issue arises in society, think about who will gain or profit from it. Then remove yourself from the equation and take a step back to look at it from a third-party perspective. See the so-called problem, look at who is reacting, why and in what way. Then look for who is offering up the solution. When you do this from now on, you'll quickly see the real truth instead of the forced truth they wanted you to see. Now, although I can see the basic guidelines of this information, Maddox clearly is a liberal and lives in a country which doesn't mind becoming a third world South Asian enclave. Hell, they started with convicts and managed to almost eradicate all the native human and wildlife both in Australia and New Zealand, so they get what they deserve in my book. But we in the UK and indeed Europe are privy to the greatest Hegelian dialectic known to man, that of the EU and by association successive UK governments. Afghanistan is the one place the US should have gone to because of Osama bin Laden, and they finished him off well done. Poor old Saddam didn't have anything to do with 9/11 but paid the same price on the altar of right and wrong with his life. And it's rare I feel sorry for a Muslim, but I felt his treatment was a letdown for the West in good manners. But the Hegelian dialectic was used by Hitler to great effect. The problem? The Jews. And we all know the final solution, which turned out to be not so final. But it proved that the governments who use it and profit by it can have it turned upon them, as the Allies did to the Third Reich, as they presented and still do all members of anything to the right of Attila the Hun as being reprehensible and a problem, and the problems the right see are promoted as virtues for Hegelian publicity. Thus the ethos of multiculturalism and diversity are seen and promoted as good, while the reasonable thinking of capping and stopping future immigration is seen as bad and racist. That is why the UK truth trucks are being vilified. The powers that be don't want illegals to go home. They don't want their capital city back. They do want, however, an increasing cheap workforce for greedy employers to force down the minimum wage even more, and a coward and a frightened population. They want the problems of the NHS blamed on our elderly and not the huge immigrant populations who live round most of the worst afflicted areas. They want mosques everywhere so that we indigenous Brits feel marginalised. They want our education systems to fail us and promote diversity. All this and more is at the bottom of their great plan. The Hegelian dialectic is a double-edged sword. If it is commented on by a liberal, it provides an excuse for, say, massive immigration, and a Marxist liberal think tank to promote situations which do not benefit Western society. But on the other hand, commented on by a nationalist or a right-winger, they are unacceptable by virtue of the truth, especially relating to immigration in the United Kingdom. The Mail had a lovely example of Hegelian dialectic on Saturday by Jack Doyle, stating that Gurmal Sikh Kandola said many illegals from India and the Punjab wanted to go home and were stuck here without help, and the trucks could prove a solution. He seems a sensible man, but on the other hand, the illegals are not the problem. The problem is they come here at all, that they often pay high fees to get here, and they destroy their papers so they cannot be deported. So the problem is not the fact they want to go home, it is the fact they see to it they cannot be sent home. So whether or not a truck passes over them or runs over the buggers, it doesn't matter. But it looks good for the Sikh community, who had it rough in India with the Muslims, who give everyone a very hard time most of the time. We had Hegelian dialectic with Charlene Downs. No national publicity, no proper investigation, because the problem was not her murderers but the child herself apparently, and the solution was to shove it under the carpet and give money to the murderers because the Islamic community could prove troublesome if prosecuted, and believe me, the Islamic counsellors, peers and whatever have the Hegelian dialectic down to a fine art. It is all positive misinformation, and the solution is never being seen to detract from the hive thought process that is Islam, and debate is non-existent because it is seen as racist. Yet another German philosopher's argument, and odd in the extreme, as Islam is a religion, not a race, but you see how it works. Give members of the public the problem, and we have the problem in our papers every day, and most of the problems are us Brits: lack of housing, lack of money, NHS in freefall, education being buggered around and more. Debate is stifled and the solution to most, if not all our problems is denied. More Hegelianisms. Mira Sayal hits out over lack of Asian faces on TV. Solution: ban them to their own channels. I don't want to see them. Terrorists in Somalia take nearly £500,000 of British aid. Solution: don't give it in the first place. There are solutions, it's just we Brits are too downtrodden now to face up to them, and our media is too frightened. And if, as in our case, the British National Party have a few sensible solutions, they are either misinterpreted, miscommunicated, or simply taken up by other politicians and hailed as another problem for the country to ponder upon. Hegelianism is alive and well in the UK. Just look at who profits from all the problems we have put before us, and it isn't the man in the street. And finally, ginger and Scottish, it can't get much worse, can it? Oh dear, we have gay pride and whatever pride, and now we have, or rather the Scots do, ginger pride. A march took place in Scotland as hundreds of redheads protested against discrimination. The parade, led by Canadian comic Sean Hitchens, wound round Edinburgh city centre to demonstrate against gingerism. Proud redheads were taken to the streets in their hundreds for the UK's first ever Ginger Pride March. The march created an amazing atmosphere as it made its way from the Balmoral Hotel in Princes Street across North Bridge to the city's Royal Mile, Mr Hitchens said. Everyone was cheering and we definitely let everyone know that it gets redder, he said. I just want to thank all my fellow gingers who took the time to attend today's inaugural. This presenter says, well, at least it got him some publicity. Soon everyone will be proud of something worth demonstrating over. Perhaps they will have a white pride one day. Or is that racist? Well, at least it was in Scotland and led by a Canadian. But carroty hair and blue skin ain't my idea of beauty, I'm afraid. But to each their own. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.